Welcome to the Recovery Stories podcast, bringing you stories of hope, healing, and triumph over the bondage of addictions, mental health struggles, trauma, and dysfunctional family systems. Our courageous storytellers have chosen to live their journey out loud in order to show others that they don't have to suffer in silence. The stories you will hear are raw, real, and may involve graphic and triggering content. This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health's Rooted alumni community. If you or a loved one are struggling, have questions, or are ready to take the next step, call our admission center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promisesbehavioralhealth.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Rooted Recovery Stories. My name is Patrick Custer and I'm your host. We're so glad that each and every one of you are here, whether you're watching or listening. Really excited to share our guest's story with you today, and so grateful to have you here, Jaime Garza. Thank you so much. Jaime is the coordinator of Collegiate Recovery and Intervention Services at the University of Alabama, and also an adjunct professor in the College of Education. But even more special to me, a brother in recovery and somebody who made a huge impact on my life back when I first got sober. So I wanted to share that just because it makes this process all the more special for me today to get to elevate his story and share it with you all. So Jaime, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Patrick. Man, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for that little intro. It gave me just chills just thinking about like your journey, and that's one of the great things about what you're doing with this podcast is they tell us that the bright spot of our life is to watch a fellowship grow amongst us, and it's been an incredible journey to watch you and your journey unfold, and let's continue to make this happen for others.
Absolutely, and well, thank you. But today is about you, and I'm excited to get into it. So I want to turn the floor over and just let you start off with where you'd like to, share where your life began and kind of paint that picture for us.
Absolutely. So my current residence is in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. And so everybody always asks me, like, how did you end up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama? Living in California and living, in Los Angeles, you really don't know much beyond Las Vegas, Nevada. Like, it's just kind of our own little country from like the shoreline of the Pacific coast to just about past Las Vegas is the United States of America for us. So like anything beyond that was foreign to us, or at least foreign to me. And so it's been an interesting story of how I got here. But I can only give credit to my creator and my recovery to be able to get here, because even though my heart always wants to be home, home is right here where I'm at, with my people and my current family, and I'm able to be content no matter where I am. But it's been a struggle between now and then, and a lot of my story has become like an evolution of my parents' story. And I guess we can start there. I come from immigrant family. My mom and my dad both came to the United States legally. They got married at a very young age. They're both from Monterrey, Mexico. My dad grew up in a family of, I think, 11 children. He was the youngest, and they all were raised on a ranch. They raised cattle and they raised all sorts of things. My grandfather, his father, died when he was at a very young age, before he was 2 years old. So he never grew up with the father, but he grew up with a lot of siblings and a very loving mom. But there was a time where my father was getting tired of being teased and picked on by his brothers and sister, and he left the ranch at a very early age and just kind of made his own way. And over the years, he went and started getting odd and end jobs. Ended up coming into the United States and worked all sorts of jobs around, and eventually landed at General Motors up in Detroit, Michigan. where he was able to kind of get a career going there, and then he got a transfer over to the Van Nuys plant in California, and from there, that's where a lot of his story started taking place. He was able to. He married my mom, and she stayed in Mexico until he kind of got established, and then he brought her over, and they kind of started their family, started their life and their family in Los Angeles. I got two older brothers. The eldest brother is 18 years my senior.
Oh, wow.
The second oldest is 16 years my senior, and then my sister, she's 10 years my senior. And so I'm the baby, and so very, relatable to my father being the last child, growing up with older siblings. Um,
Man, I have the same
but
exact,
that's
except
been,
a little, the years are a little off, but I have two older brothers that are just about that much older than me,
yeah,
and then a sister who's a little bit closer to my age, um, as well. That's so weird. I don't know if I've ever met anybody with that similar of a sibling
yeah,
structure.
and it's pretty insane now because me and my sister are very, very close. And I'm starting to realize now because my daughter, who's about to be 16 in January, and my son is 6 years, so they're about 9 years difference, 8, 9 years difference between them, and I get to see how close they are. And
Hmm.
I'm starting to realize why my sister and my relationship are just so tight because there's just kind of like there's like a maternal role there that
Yeah.
we actually often have to tell her like just be his sister, don't be his mom. And but it's kind of cool growing up in our family. My dad continued to work for General Motors. And the thing that he had to develop was not only was he working, he ended up going to night school to learn the English language. Um,
Wow.
Again, he has a second grade education. That's as far as he went with his elementary level schooling. Worked on the ranch, left, just worked hard his entire life. So he went up going to night school, learning the language, and then also on top of that, learning how to rebuild transmissions for automobiles. So that was part of his gig. And over time, he and my mom is the brains of the operation. She knows how to manage the money. And my dad would work odd end jobs after work, working for the neighborhood and fixing their cars. And then my mom would make food for him to take to work to eat for lunch, and then also to sell. And they were always hustlers. That's my family, man. We've just always been these hustlers of never using excuses why we can't be successful in this country.
Mm.
Waiting for a handout. My parents have always kind of ingrained that nature in us of just work, work, work. And all my brothers, my dad started teaching them how to build transmissions. So from the age of 6 years old, my brothers were building transmissions for cars. You know, and that
Wow.
trend kind of followed through with all of us. We all started very, very young. Um, and over time, with my parents' hard work and my mom's financial disciplines, they were able to start building their own business, and we were able to open a transmission shop. Later on, opened a second shop, and to this day, my brothers still operate and own the transmission business that my parents built.
That's pretty
Um,
cool.
and that's kind of where my story kind of landed in is because my dad would always have these disciplines, and we had a lot of rental properties because every time my parents moved from one house to another house when they started elevating in the economic class, they never sold their home, they kept it and they started renting it out to people, so that was another source of income. Again, my mom being brilliant with finances. And I think they own several homes now. We still collect property rent and all those other good, and it's all cash because the property is paid for.
That's awesome.
Um, but we didn't go hire contractors to go fix the driveway or to rebuild the roof. That landed on us. My dad would always have us out there. I remember I was like under the age of 10, and I was out there making cement and making cement walls and putting in rebar and up on the roof with a hammer and nails and just and then after school I would go to the transmission shop and I'd be out there sanding clutches and washing parts and road testing cars. And I appreciate that today, but during that time I was frustrated. I was angry, like because I got to see all my other friends and they were always out there playing, and they would get the new Game Boys and all the new systems, and I got those things too, but I didn't have a lot of time to play with them because I was always expected to go out there and work. Um, and I fought that at a very young age, right? Because again, there was 10-year separation between me and my sister, 18 with my eldest brothers. They had the business going. I didn't grow up in those early years when my parents were just kind of like dirt poor, and it was like a necessity to work, and everybody had to put their part. I kind of came out on the tail end a little bit with, a little bit spoiled. But again, in comparison to my peers and everybody at school, I just had this like underlying resentment that I had to go out and work and I had to do all these things. I didn't get to have all the luxury that everybody else had. And so again, I just kind of that just kind of always was with me and in me. And I always rebelled because my dad wanted me to go into the family business, and I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to do it. I'm fighting him tooth and nail. I'm going to go get an education. And I told him I was going to be a doctor. That's where I told him, right? I'm going to be a doctor. And they all just looked at me like, okay, whatever, right? And so that just kind of drove me. But
Do you know what drove you? What specifically drew you to want to be a doctor?
just pure spite,
Oh yeah.
right? And again, I get that from my father because my father, when he left the ranch at a very young age, all his brothers and sisters all told him that he wasn't going to amount to anything, right?
Mm,
That he was not educated, he wasn't smart, he didn't know anything, and that he was going out there and he'd be back. And pure spite, my father never came back. He went out there, made his own, and he ended up becoming the most successful of all his brothers and sisters. Right?
mm,
He was the one that made it, and so again, I think that's in my DNA, right? That
yeah.
I'll show you, and but again, my father was not, innocent. He wasn't just a pure hard worker. My dad over time also had alcoholism. Not a lot of us knew that,
Mm,
but he had alcoholism, and it was always around the house. Alcohol was around the house. Um, but that's not part of my story. Like I didn't start at a very young age and developed into this dependency and fell in love with it. Like I actually despised like drugs and alcohol when I was growing up because I just knew that it was a deterrent from like my desire and passion to like succeed. So again, I was always been driven by this passion to succeed, but I also had these defects of character of like procrastination and laziness. Like just because I didn't want to like show them that I can do all these things, I wanted to use my mind and my brilliance, and I was going to blah blah blah. But that all caught up to me over time. But like I say, when we think about like the family of origin, like where this all was rooted from, it was always this idea that I had in my head. Because the way I heard it from my parents, and I know this now, but I didn't know this then, was that I had to be the best, right? That was the message that I always received. You
yeah.
have to be the best at everything and anything you do. I remember very vividly going to Sears, right back when Sears was an actual thing, a
Hmm.
department store in the mall, and I just wanted some rollerblades, right? So for y'all who don't know what rollerblades are, they're like roller skates. They're inline skates, and it's for people who don't want to just constantly eat crap on ice skating. But I wanted them, and I didn't really know what brand was. I didn't know that like the different brands of actual rollerblade was a brand. I just wanted some rollerblades,
Yeah.
and I saw some at Sears, and I looked at them, and they were the ones that kind of clip onto your shoes. They stretch out and they clip
Yeah.
on, and you strap them down.
Yep.
And I asked my dad for them, and he looked at me. He's like, "If you're gonna get something, you need to get the best quality." And so he took me to a different department store and bought me the actual brand rollerblade, right? And so again, that had always was ingrained in me that you always have to be the best and always have to have the best,
Mm,
right? That's how the mindset you have to have. So I always was driven by that, driven by that. Um, I later found out that you know what drove me was to be the best. That my father actually was trying to give it your best, right? To give it,
mm,
but I'd never heard that translation until later on, which I'll cover that here shortly. But I was always driven by like that need to dominate, that need to always be the best, and to do this and do that. But when it came to like academics, I couldn't. I was always behind all my classmates, right? I always had on the report cards like C's and B's, and then I always failed the mark of like does not get along well with others, right? Because I've always had this spirit of like competition. I got to beat you. I got to be the best at you. And I
Hmm.
always picked fights in school, and I always had a hard time like getting along with others. That was always my thing, is getting along with others. Um, but then I landed in, middle school, high school, uh, and during that time between the ages of like 12 and 13 years old, like you can't imagine this because you know how big I am, Pat. It's like I'm a big dude, but when I grew up, I was skinny and scrawny. I was a
Really?
scrawny little kid, um, and I wanted to play high school football, and so I went for a physical because you had to get a physical and get the doctor to sign a release so you can play. And she started feeling around in my neck, and she found a lump in my neck, and so I ended up having a tumor on my thyroid.
Wow.
Um, and so at the age of 13, I had to have surgery on my thyroid and get that tumor out of there. Once that tumor was removed, um, my growth spurt took place, right? Something happened with my hormones and everything else, and all of a sudden, like I had a deeper voice.
Yeah.
Everybody always would call the house, and I would answer, and I had a really squeaky voice, and everybody thought, "Hey, little girl, is your mom home?" And I was always like offended by that because I had a
Hmm.
high pitched voice. I guess it was because that tumor was pinching or pushing against my vocal cords, and as soon as that thing was out, like it was on. Like my growth to being a man was going to start. Started getting big. I started getting bulky. Started playing high school football. I was really good at it. I absolutely enjoyed just hitting people. That was my thing, and I was good. I wasn't good at academics, but I was good at football, and this was going to be my ticket out of the family business. Like I wasn't
Hmm.
going to get stuck having
Yeah.
to work in the family business, so I attached myself to football. It became my everything. Drugs and alcohol were always around the high school scenes, and I tried, smoking weed a couple times. I didn't like it. I didn't like the dry mouth. I didn't like the silliness that came with it. I drank alcohol from a young age. Like it was always around the house. And I remember drinking champagne at my sister's quinceañera. I got a little buzz, but it wasn't something that I was like obsessing about.
Yeah.
And then when we would go to football, like go after parties at football games, and all my teammates were like drinking and smoking, I was like, I'd get pissed. I'd get angry. I'm like, what are y'all doing? Right? Because their part in my life, was influential. Like I needed my team to be good
Yeah.
so that we can
Yeah.
get recruits and people to come look at us play so that I can get out of here. Um, and so I was always, all my teammates about their drinking and their drugging. I was kind of like Captain Dare, right? I was going around telling people that drugs are bad, don't do that, and yada
Yep.
yada yada. Um, but that's just kind of where I was with drugs and alcohol. So like again, I'm not the one that said that alcohol just immediately made its way into my life. But then came the time when I was leaving high school to go to college, and I had a lot of universities looking at me. But the thing that was holding me back was my ability to be an academic. Right, I had terrible grades. I was too scared to take the SATs. I didn't even
Hmm.
want to take it because I knew that it would be pointless. Like I would bomb it, and any kind of chance of me going to college would be gone. Um, I ended up going to a community college, started playing some college ball there. Um, Continued to excel. I was awesome. I was making the All Star teams. I was getting headline news. Everybody was talking about me, and the ability to transfer from a 2 year college to a 4 year college was possible. Right.
Yeah.
The coaches made sure I had all the right teachers. I was sitting in front of the class. I didn't really read my first book from cover to cover until my second year in college.
No way.
I promise you, and I still know the book to this day. It is The Princess Bride.
Oh man. And did you like it?
I loved it. I
Yeah.
actually watched the movie, and I was like, this book is better than the movie. And I remember my teacher. She was this little 4'9" lady, and she absolutely despised the football players because they would come in there and be all gregarious and
Hmm.
thought they owned the place. And I made it my mission to change her mind, and she fell in love with us. And
That's
I was
awesome.
there, and I started reading my first book, and then after that, I read a book called The Hot Zone, and I was just getting into literature. I was like, I actually like this, and it was cool. And then like I was playing well, and I was like excited, and I was getting some high level recruits coming. I knew that I wanted to go play at UCLA. That was my school, and I actually got a letter of a scholarship from them. But I did get into an injury during that year. I ended up breaking my ankle, fracturing it, and I never really paid attention to it. I didn't want to go get surgery because, again, in athletics, especially collegiate athletics, and I've done some research on this. Like the desire to ask for help is very low, and the reason why is because we put a lot of stock in like our worth of how we're going to get recruited. If you start showing flaws of physical health, broken ankles, broken this, your stock goes down. And don't even get into like mental health issues, right? If you've got mental health issues, you don't ever want to talk about that because you'll never get recruited to the next level,
It's
right?
sad.
And so I just kind of kept my mouth shut, started wrapping my ankle real tight with sports tape, and I started taking a lot of pain medication, right? And that's where the cycle started
Mm.
for me was the transportation from where I was to where I wanted to go, which was to eventually play in the NFL and make millions and millions of dollars and have my own house and show my whole entire family like my success I showed you,
Yep.
started to disappear. The pain medication tolerance level started going super high. Um, Ended up start going into injectable opiates. And then before I know it, when I graduate, when I was ready to transfer over, I never made it to practices. I never got to accept my scholarship, just because by that time my drug addiction went skyrocketing, absolutely skyrocketed. Um, and then I lost my eligibility to play because I woke up, 6 years later. Like,
Mm.
where did my life go? And that's kind of how it all began. And then I was just kind of demoralized because my need to show everybody that I was succeeding was gone, and I just kind of hid in shame for years. I tried to start moving around, and I was in lots of drugs and alcohol. Um, my parents knew some about it. They were trying to get me to go to treatment once, twice. It wasn't helping because I still didn't have like a purpose,
Yeah.
and I was still very anti go back and concede to my family you were right and go work for the business. I wasn't gonna do it. I was gonna see this thing to the bitter end, and I just hit out. I started moving, and I moved to Arizona, and I moved back to California, and moved in with an old roommate from treatment, and then I got bad. Um, it was just it just was not well done at that point. So that's just kind of like the history of like how I got to like the depths of my addiction.
Yeah. So at the depths, can you paint that picture for us? What like before you actually got sober? What did life look like for you at that point?
Yeah. So I started getting into the bodybuilding industry, not as a competitor or a bodybuilder. One of my best friends, was competing at the junior level, and so I went to go to watch him compete, and I ended up, backstage at one of the shows in Pasadena. Um, and one of the legends in the bodybuilding industry used to work out with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was a former Mr. Universe. He saw me back there and he saw my presence. I was a big guy, big football player, loud voice, just had a presence. And he said, "Hey man, come over here." And he offered me a job, and I started working backstage at all the bodybuilding shows as an expediter. And over time, I kind of ended up becoming into a role of the head expediter, which basically working all the NPC shows, IFBB shows, the Mr. Universe, Mr. Olympias, all those shows, the big shows. Um, but there's a lot of drugs and alcohol and steroids at these places, and I kind of got lost in all that. Um, and being in LA, it's a 3.5 hour drive to Mexico, and in Mexico you can find all your drugs that you need, and you have to take the risk of coming back across the border.
Mm.
So At this point, my opioid addiction was pretty bad. I wasn't able to take pills anymore. I was like full on injecting. I was full on,
Wow.
nalbuphine, morphine. I ended up getting to the level of horse tranquilizers.
Wow.
So these are medication that you use to put horses to sleep for surgery. Is the level of opiates that I was at that time.
Were you
Um,
functioning like you do it and go do your job? Take
I was
that.
functioning, like I said, in the bodybuilding industry. Nubane, nalbuphine is kind of like the morphine cousin. It was is like all around the area, so we would always get this injectable opiate. And then, right around the time of September 11th, is when we stopped seeing an influx of Nubane coming into the country.
Mm,
So like we were all scrambling because we were super dependent at this time, and we started getting withdrawals. And me and my friend, we were like, dude, we need to find some stuff. And the thing is, the borders were shut down. September 11th, no one was coming in and out.
uh,
All the companies, and so we ended up getting in the car, heading down to Mexico, going, and we found a veterinary store where they sell like stuff for horses and tackle and medication. We ended up going there and we were like asking like, hey, do you all have any Nunu? Right, the name was Nunu, and like, no, we can't get it because the United States was not sending it to Mexico. Again, borders were shut down,
mm-hmm.
transportation. They said, but we have this other stuff. It's just like it. It's just a little bit stronger. And I went in there. They gave me a little vial. I went into the bathroom. I injected it. Boom! I knocked out for 4 hours in the bathroom. When I finally came to, I was like, this is what I've been looking for. And I said, give me some more of that. One little vial would last me a month. I'll just take a
Wow.
little drop and it would knock me out. Boom, 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 boom. And then over several years, like I was taking full 50 milliliter vials, like all in one shot. And I was
Wow.
functioning. And that was crazy. Um, that was my life. I was working back and forth, bringing drugs and alcohol back and forth across the border. I guess you would call that smuggling, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't see it that way. I was just like, I'm just going down there to get my own personal. And then people would ask me, and then it was getting crazy. I was getting pulled over to secondary all the time. I was able to find the loopholes because I'm a professional loophole finder. I
Sure.
knew which guy at the border was lazy and wasn't really going to expect you to like pull you over and actually investigate what's going on. And so I
Mm,
actually had a kid that recognized my vehicle. So every time he see me, he'd come up to me and I said, go to the front. There's like 30, border patrol booths. And I said, go find where the guy is at. And he'd come back. He's like, he's in number 14. And I'd give him $50. And I'd go in that line and I'd keep going past. They never
wow.
pulled me over after that time because that's how creative and savvy I was. I knew the man's work schedule. I knew when he was going to be there. So I worked my operation around that. Um, and it got bad, and it got bad really, really fast. And then the depths of my addiction didn't even scratch the surface. But one incident was, I was at home and living with my parents still, and my parents were gone for a couple weeks. I think they might have been to Europe. I don't recall the actual details. Um, but I started having hallucinations, right?
Mm,
Because I was locked up in my room for weeks without any human contact. There was nobody to talk to, and I was just in there doing drugs and playing around on AOL.com when the internet started having like instant messengers and
man, you're
all that
talking
other
about a long time
nonsense.
ago.
Long time ago,
Yeah.
and during that time I had a hallucination, and uh, I had an encounter with what I knew at this time was the devil, and I started running around the house, and I got a firearm, and I was chasing this thing around the house, and I ended up in my front yard pointing a gun at my own house, and my brother, my eldest brother, he was next door because that's where he lives, and he saw this happening. I'm like, and he comes out like, dude, what's going on? I'm like, dude, the devil's after me. What?
How do you respond to that?
Dude, and I thank God to this day that my brother was smart enough to like play along with me,
Yeah.
because if he started like there's no devil, what's going on, you're
Right.
crazy, like I could have turned on my brother.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's how psychotic I was in that moment. But he was smart enough to say like, all right, dude, well, let me help you. Let's go find them together. And he put his hand on my shoulder. And as soon as he touched me, I snapped out of it. I was like,
Wow.
whoa, what just happened there? What's going on? And I came. That's how important human contact is. Just a
You know,
simple touch.
that immediately just I got chills because I was thinking about how much, and I know this is loosely related, but some people, may not have heard of grounding. But when we talk about how effective and purposeful grounding can be,
You know.
um, even not on not on psychotic on drugs, it that getting bringing yourself to a place where you are in the here and now is it's so powerful, and sometimes can be just that, what you're explaining.
Yeah, like I said, and again, when it comes to people who are out there right now and us in recovery, we isolate those people, right? Because they're on
Mm-hmm.
drugs, and I don't need to get near those people. Like those people need us, right?
Yep.
Because just that human element, that human contact, can help you break out of any kind of psychosis, any kind of spiritual despair. And I'm just grateful that my brother was smart enough to like help me out. He touched me, and then immediately after that, he's like, I think you need to go to treatment. I was like, you think? Right? Like the gig is up. Like I'm
Yeah.
pointing a gun at my house. This ain't good. My parents came back from wherever,
So you were
and
willing. You at that point you saw things for what they were, and open to what he was saying.
I was open. My dad sat down, and my dad, I thought he was just going to be absolutely angry. And that's like one of the first times I saw my father cry. Like
Wow.
he felt like he failed me, and he was just so sad. And we ended up talking about going to treatment. And I went to treatment, and it wasn't the last time I went to treatment, but it definitely was the beginning of like the journey for me.
Sure.
But again, I thought that was the depths of my addiction, of the problem, and it wasn't. Um, so when I finally returned back from treatment after doing really really well and agreeing to do the steps, I did all 3 steps. I did it in their little workbook, and I answered all the
Mm-hmm.
questions, and that was the treatment rock star, and um, it was it was what it needed to be. And they're like, you need to go to a halfway house and do some IOP. I was like, nah, I've
Were you
got God.
offended?
I was a fan. I got God in my heart now. I've
Yeah.
done. I did 3 good steps. I got a
Yep.
sponsor. I didn't have a sponsor, and I was like, I got this. And I left treatment. I thought I convinced everybody. I went back to live with my parents, and I on the surface I appeared to be better because I stopped doing opiates and I
Mm-hmm.
moved to crystal methamphetamines.
Oh, well, there you go.
And so everybody thought this recovery business was like a miracle, right? Because
Yeah.
Jaime is no longer in bed all day long. He doesn't look like he's actually like losing weight. He's taking care of himself. He's cleaning like underneath his car seats with a toothbrush. Like he
Completely opposite direction, right?
completely opposite direction.
Yeah.
Everybody was fooled. I'm up all the time. I'm asking my brother, yeah, I'll take your watch apart and put a battery in there for you, and couldn't put it back together. And like, of all the drugs that I did, like crystal just took me to the bottom
Mm-hmm.
fast. It wasn't long. I was working as an after school counselor. I was showing up to school high all the time. It was bad. Like if you talk about like moralistically, like I
Mm-hmm.
was a terrible human being during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Relationships were broken. Um, I wasn't trustworthy. Like I said, I ended up moving to Phoenix, trying to get away, and I landed in Phoenix. I came back the next week just to kind of re up on Kristen. I was going back and forth constantly, southwest, back and forth, and it was bad real quick. And then I ended up moving in with my one of my old roommates from that first treatment center, and he was calling in fake prescriptions. So I started reintroducing back old drugs. And so
Mm-hmm.
not only was I doing crystal, I was doing somas, I was doing Norcos, and I got back on the horse tranquilizers, and I was mixing horse tranquilizers with crystal methamphetamines, and ended up becoming really, really bad, and depleted, but no consequences, like except for like my morality and my health.
Excuse me.
Yeah, bless you. And that's when the end came for me. It was like it wasn't like an intervention of like the law or my parents.
Mm.
I was isolated. I was alone. I stopped going around the family. I stopped going around. I lost my relationships. I was just in my apartment, just broken and
Yeah.
tired.
That's it's so interesting that you say that. First of all, to that you were able to maintain doing that cocktail of substances, but especially uppers without consequences, real substantial consequences, because it's not very often that we hear that being the case. I know from my personal experience, that's when things changed like crazy, and it was for me, and I think many people, it almost takes the outside consequences for a change to occur. So, how interesting, and I think unique and special that you came to this place of despair internally and were able to say this is enough. So did you voice that and say I need help, or?
Yeah, I did. And again, there was a lot of in between stuff that did happen. Like, my father got into an altercation,
Mm,
and he ended up in the hospital because of it. Um, the police showed up and they were going to arrest me, and my father continued to show his love for me and said, "I don't want to press any charges." Like, there was all that going on. So like
sure.
I never received consequences, but there was potential for consequences there.
Yep.
But towards the end, like my family like wasn't communicating with me, um, and I had to make a decision. I remember the last day I was in my apartment. I remember going to my roommate and asking him for some pills, and he was like, you know, I just ran out. I'm like, I know he's lying, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know he's lying. So now
Yep.
my roommate, like my road dog, has turned his back on me, and I
Mm,
just knew it was the end of the road. So I got in my car, and at that time I was in the underground parking garage, and I was gonna make a decision because my crystal meth dealer was in Amsterdam on vacation, because that's what drug dealers do, right? They accrue enough vacation time
yeah.
to take off, and he left me with like 3 weeks worth of crystal, and I used it all within like 72 hours. And it was that fast. It was that gone. I had no more drugs. My roommate wasn't giving me anything, and I was so burnt out. So I had to make a decision. I was either gonna go, I was gonna leave my parking deck, and I could make a left-hand turn, and get on the interstate or the freeway and head down to Mexico, or I can make a right turn and go to my parents' business and ask for help. And
Wow.
this was the first time that God and I had a conversation in a long time.
So this
And
wasn't just a metaphorical fork in the road. You
yeah,
literally,
there was a fork in the road. And I said,
yeah.
God, I'm gonna let you help me make this decision. So, like, coming out of the park, there was a little bit of a decline, and so I let go of the steering wheel, and the car turned to the right. And that was the intervention that I needed. I drove to my parents' business, and I sat in the office and I didn't say a single thing. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, and I just started crying. And they said, "Are you ready?" And I was like, and so we started making arrangements, um, and I ended up in a treatment center in Riverside, California, and that was the last time that I used, and that was October 6th, 2004.
Wow. How old were you?
I was 24 years old.
Really? That's how old I was when I got sober too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's awesome. So, what did your you know we talk about everybody's got a different journey for what worked for them, what impacted their recovery story, um, and I always like to point out that there's this pressure for everybody to think that healing and recovery is this linear process that goes, and it's not. I mean, very rarely do we see very rarely do we see that take place. It is much more up and down, and similar to how you've been explaining yours was. And so, but I'm interested to hear what was life like that first year for recovery for you. What were the good choices that you made, and what would you say are some of the biggest things that made a difference in your that foundational layer for you?
Well, it all started. I laugh because I already know the outcome of all this. So again, I still have these demons inside of me. Rather, you can remove the drugs and the alcohol, but like the root causes of why I used in the first place were still there.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I still needed to show my family that I was going to be successful, right? And so um, you can only be so disappointed in yourself for so long that you create kind of a, I don't know. For me, I created a false identity of who I was, and the story that I created was that I was a drummer for like this band, and that I was, gonna tour with all these people. And so when I went to that treatment center and they started asking me questions and telling me, what do you do for a living, and I was just lying the whole time. And but in the moment, like that was my life, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
how I survived my like reflection, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way I survived my reflection was creating a false persona that I could live within, a character that was presentable to the world so that I didn't have to constantly look at the disappointment and the failure that I was, at least how I saw myself. So I
Mm-hmm.
told him I was a drummer and I was this, I was that. I would carry headphones around my neck around treatment all day long. I had some drumsticks in my back pocket. I was doing all this stuff, and I thought I had them fooled. And I was walking to group, and I was telling all these stories, and everybody was asking me all these questions, and I was like, "Man, they think I'm cool," and all this other stuff.
Right.
And I remember my counselor pulling me out of group, taking me down to his office, and he started like, "Hey, guess what?" I was like, "Yeah, what's up, man?" He's like, "Call your parents." And I asked them how they felt about you supporting them with like your drumming career. They're like, "Dude, you need to get truthful. You need to get real." And like that to me was the turning point.
Mm.
I got a core group of guys that we talk every day on a Marco Polo app. It's like a video chat.
I love Marco Polo, and I love to know that you use it too.
Oh, I use it every day, and we
Yeah,
do we do 10-step inventory every day, just how we're
that's
doing
awesome.
spiritually, and then we carry on to side conversations. But I told them the other day that there's a movie called Kill Bill, um,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a song called The Lonely Shepherd. It's just an instrumental song that it's played at the end of the first volume. And I remembered after being confronted by my counselor and told that I need to get truthful, and he
Mm-hmm.
walked me back to the group room, and they stopped group and they said, "All right, Jaime has something to tell you." And I confessed. I was like, "Look, guys, I'm not a drummer. I'm not this. This is who I am." And literally everybody like clapped for me and says, "We knew you weren't a drummer from fucking day one. We just let you be, in your
Yeah.
world. We met you where you were." And it was this ongoing joke. And then, like that evening, I went to this little like brick wall and I sat on it. And I remember putting my headbuds in. I had this little, Sony mini disc player. It was like the next phase of like audio after the CD, and I had the Lonely Shepherd on there, and I started playing it, and I was looking at this green patch of something, and in that moment, I had to come to terms with who I was and who I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
and that song played, and I remember like I came to accept like you're not perfect and you're a mess, but we're gonna start changing that today, and that green patch of grass all the little blades came into like high definition. I was able to see every little blade. It wasn't just this green splotch of something. It was like, and it was the first time I realized that I was in the moment, because I spent so much time and effort having to constantly think 2 or 3 steps ahead to keep the facade going. And for the first time, I let my hair down. This is who I am. These are my track wounds. This is who I am, and I've got to be okay with that. And like that was like that first year, I started following direction. My counselor says you need to go to extended care. He's like, I'm like, you're gonna go down to Newport Beach for 90 days. I was like, oh, not Newport Beach, right? And so I go down to Newport Beach for another 90 days, and I just kept on following direction and following direction. The only direction I did not follow was the no fraternization rule, and that's where I met my girl, and now my current wife is in treatment. But again, all other rules I followed them. I was killing it. I got a sponsor. I was going to meetings. Got a home group. I was doing a service. I was cleaning up ashtrays. I did everything I was going to do. But the piece that was like monumental in my recovery and in my life today in that first year was my counselor over in Newport. His name was Johnny Orlando, and he passed away a couple years ago. Um, but he looked at me and he says, Jaime, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And I said, Johnny, I am so tired of having to try to figure out the answer of that. And I said, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And he's like, well, you do real good in group rooms and you have a passion for this. So why don't you try to go to school and learn some stuff about being a drug and alcohol counselor? And he pointed me in a direction. He helped me go get set up at a community college nearby called Saddleback. I started going to class, and I fell in love with the topic. Um, but all I needed was a man to tell me, why don't you just try this and see if it fits?
Mm-hmm.
To make errors. And I did it. I'm like, what else
Do
do
you
I
feel
got
like that
going?
was the first time somebody gave you permission to say you're good enough and nobody cares if you're going to make a mistake? You just need to try.
I think that's the
Because I
first
feel
time.
like that perfectionism is a
Mhm.
major theme I'm hearing, like
Oh,
straight
yeah.
up through your entire life.
And again, I'm pretty confident that my family has told me throughout my life. I just never heard it.
Uh,
But this was the first time from someone outside my family where a lot of my that self-perceived judgment came from. And he was a little guy from Philly, looked like Mario from Mario Brothers. And he just said, "Go try it out." I tried it, I fell in love with it, and he pointed me in the direction of academia, right? And I went back to school. And I was like, "Johnny, I'm not good at school." He's like, "That's all right, me neither." Right? He go, "But just go and just follow direction and sit in front and talk to your teachers and do your homework." And I was like, "All right, cool, 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 cool." And eventually, I graduated there with my certification, and I became a drug and alcohol counselor. And all I needed was someone to kind of just point me in a direction, and I went. And it was super cool that first year, man. But I was working at Costco, right? I had to
One of
wear
my
a
favorite
hairnet.
places.
I had to wear an apron because I worked in the food court and serving hot dogs and pizzas
Yeah.
and chicken bakes and churros. And I hated it. I had to take out people's trash and get all that trash juice all over you. And I
Mm-hmm.
was used to being the kid of the owner of the transmission business. I'd
Mm-hmm.
walk around and tell people what to do. I thought I was hot shit, right? And now I'm over here like working a job where I'm serving people hot dogs. It was humiliating, right? And I was going to quit, but my sponsor said, "You're not going to quit till you get 1 year of sobriety." And because I made the commitment that I was going to do whatever they told me to do, I did it. And so on day 366, I quit, right? But I kept my commitment.
Yeah.
And I was going to school, I was working, I was going to meetings. Um, I just kind of did the deal. I wasn't really thinking, I was just doing. And that first year went by really, really fast.
Wow. So, you know, a, a few things that I think stand out to me that you've said um, are commitment, following through, transparency, getting honest with yourself and others, and oh man, the last one just left my head. But you know, looking at what themes make or break us, or what are really needed, in that first year, I think is it's just interesting because you can't necessarily predict it because everybody needs something different. But one thing that I definitely believe in is that, when we put one foot in front of the other, and we start with that magic foundational approach of throwing your hands up in surrender and saying, I don't have the answers, and I'm willing to, like, those of you who have more experience than me, what is it? And, it sounds like you did the thing. You were surrounded by people that were willing to speak that into you, and give you advice and whatnot. And I think that makes all the difference in the world, and what those next chapters hold.
Yeah.
And willingness, right? So fast forwarding a little bit, you may change directions, ended up in Nashville, which is how we knew each other for quite some time, and you've kind of done a good bit of things since then. If you want to touch on some of that stuff, you are a world changer and have been for some years. So share. I'd love to have you share with everybody about what your career has been in that trajectory.
Yeah, it's always crazy to look backwards because there's I still suffer with like it's not enough, right?
You
Like
don't say.
it's still never enough, and
Yeah.
that demon. Like you ever seen that show Dexter? It's like the dark passenger. Like he's
Mm-hmm.
always with me. That dark passenger
Mm-hmm.
is always with me. I tell everybody I wake up every single day with the disease. I never wake up with any recovery. Like I have to start incorporating recovery into my life
Yeah.
because I'm sick. The moment I wake up, I'm sick, and but I look back and, even when I got that life changing experience of like, learning to be transparent and telling the truth and not hiding, like even when I met my wife, like I went down to that sober living, that extended care program, and I
Mm-hmm.
kind of kept going with the story of the drummer for a little while. And that's how she and I kind of got together. And then she found out later through my parents again, they're always telling on me that, I was not a drummer and all this other stuff. And God, it's just sick, right? Like I always have this sickness inside of my head because at that early stage, I still didn't have anything that I was proud of,
Yeah.
right? I had this like awakening, but I still had a whole lot of like failures,
Right.
not a whole lot of accomplishments. So
Yep.
again, I still had to fight the guy in the reflection. And so I kept
Mm-hmm.
on with the old habits, which don't just die overnight. Um, but I ended up going to school and I got my degree there, and I went to go work at the same treatment center that I got sober at. And it was kind of a weird transition going from like, client to
Mm-hmm.
to worker. I'm sure we both know what
Yep.
that feels like. It's
Yep.
odd because I want they don't think for me to think they're cool and and then it's even weirder when you went to treatment with somebody and then they come back in like years later
Yeah.
and like you're like, okay, how do I navigate this role, right? We used to sit in the bus in the smoking hut and talk shit, and now like I got to tell you like go make your bed. It's like come on, man.
Yep.
Um, but it was cool that during that time I learned a lot. Uh, me and my wife, let me know that she was pregnant, and that was kind of a life changing experience. I was like, okay, what do we do here? We had our daughter, and she really changed my life because if you really want to break somebody of their selfishness and self centeredness, like go get a kid in your life.
Mm.
Go get a kid in your life, and you will be broken of your selfishness and
Yeah.
self-centeredness. A dog or something that you don't have to. But when a kid comes in your life, like it is life changing. And we were living in Newport Beach, and I realized pretty quickly that I can't afford $2,500 a month in rent and all this other stuff. So we had to leave, and my wife's family is from North Carolina, so we wanted to move closer to them, but not too close. So we chose Nashville. Um, we took the leap of faith and I went there, and I was promised a job at a treatment center nearby, so I moved to Burns, Tennessee. That fell through. I was crazy because I just bought a house, my first house. I had a less than a 1 year old baby girl. I just got married. I'm 2,000 miles away from what I know is home, and I don't have a job. And the guy who lured me over to Nashville, he was apologetic. I'm sorry, I should have called you. That budget fell through, yada yada yada. And I told him, I said, dude, you should thank God for AA because it saved your life.
Yeah,
Because I was homicidal,
I bet.
and but it again. God knows what's going on in my life, and that place ended up going under. That 3 months of being unemployed, I was allowed to find a treatment center in Nashville, um, and started working there. And it was a great experience. It was an hour drive back and forth to that location and back, but it was great for me. I was able to develop and sharpen my skills. I was a director of an extended care program there. I was able to work with professionals and learn some more of the trade. And then one day, the chief clinical officer came and asked me if I was willing to create a young adult program. And I was like, absolutely not. I hate young adults. I hate those kids. They're just da 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 da. And I
Uh-huh.
think a lot of it's because they reminded me of the person that I despised, which was
Yeah.
myself at that young
Mhm.
age. But they continue to like you give it some real thought and yada yada. And I ended up going to Akron, Ohio, to the birthplace of AA. I
Yeah.
went to me and one of my friends, we went up there and just kind of searching our souls if this was something that needed to be done. And I remember that I was sitting in the Cyberlink house where Dr. Bob and Bill met for the first time. And it just kind of came to me like, you've got to do this. And so I got inspired. We came back. I said, I'm all in. And we created the young adult program at that place. And it just was firing on all cylinders. It was really, really good. The University of Alabama was sending us a lot of their students to this
Mhm.
treatment center and to the young adult program. And so I kind of got a really good relationship with the university. And during that time, I was happy. I was content in Nashville. Again, life is not always perfect. There was, some struggles in my marriage. I was finishing up a master's program. It was 2012 where, me and my wife were going through some stuff. Um, I was finishing up a master's degree. The University of Alabama wanted me to come build a program here, and my father died in 2012.
Mhm.
Like 2012 was like one of the worst years of my life,
Wow.
right? But I had, 6 going on 7 years of sobriety,
Yeah.
and it was what I call between now and then, I knew that I was making spiritual deposits that
Yeah.
I was going to need to withdraw. And I withdrew all my funds in 2012. Um, and I thank God for the program and those around me that I got through it. Um, but I finished up my master's degree. Me and my wife were going to counseling. We restored our marriage, and the university offered me a job. And they told me, we want you to come down here and build us a program. So we successfully built a campus drug court program, a collegiate recovery community. We serve 400 to 700 students every single academic year, and with the mind of not kicking kids out of school because they have a substance use disorder, but providing them with treatment and services, second and third opportunities, getting people to graduation. Um, it's just such a joy. Um, but the coolest part was, throughout my life, I always knew that I wasn't made for academics. I wasn't smart, right? I
Yeah.
still believe that to this day. Like, I am terrible when it comes to academics. But what I learned in my program was suit up, show up, and follow direction. Ask for help. Trust God. Help others. And I did that. And I did my bachelor's degree that way, and when I got my master's degree that way, and when I got to Alabama, people kept on pushing me like, you need to go get your doctorate. And I was like, I don't want to. Like, I'm terrible at school. Like, I am not smart, y'all. Like, there's no way that I can finish this. So again, you talk about all these accomplishments that I have, but that dark passenger consistently tells me that I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be good enough. So I deal with a lot of imposter syndrome, right? That they're going to find out that I'm this old drug smuggling, drug addict guy. They're going to find me out and they're going to kick me out of the program. They're going to fire me from the University of Alabama. And I live with those thoughts every day, right? And that's why I tell you, I wake up with the disease every single morning, because that happens even to this day. I'm a terrible father. I'm a terrible husband. I'm a terrible this. And then I need God to consistently remind me that I'm not those things, right? That's just my disease trying to convince me to go back to what was easy and comfortable. Um, so in the 8 years here at Alabama, we've been able to successfully help a lot of people get to graduation. I did eventually get into that doctoral program. Um, 3 years later, here I am with my PhD, and I finally fulfilled my promise that I was going to be a doctor, right? I didn't know what kind of doctor,
Right.
but I became a doctor. It was heartbreaking for me not to have my father to present, even though I know he was present. And it happened like during COVID. And so my mom was not going to be able to attend my graduation because she couldn't get on a plane. And I said, Mom, I'll be right there. So I flew from Alabama to Los Angeles, rented a car, picked my mom up, drove her across the country. She got to see me graduate, and it was it was phenomenal. It was awesome.
I just got chills, man. That is really cool. I wanted to mention, whether you know it or not, something that I think is really neat. While you talk about having one of the worst years of your life back in 2012, late late 2011 and through 2012, before you left, little did you know, as you're having the worst year of your life, you're making a huge impact on mine and some other people's lives in recovery, because you were showing up, doing service, being a presence and an example of long-term recovery, hosting these recovery campouts that I would go to. And let me tell you, the drum circle that you used to lead was the first experience that ever facilitated my ability to let go of how much I cared about what other people thought of me. And that's one of the biggest impacts, or changes or shifts that you can have as a person, I think, but especially as a recovering person. Because as much as, I mean, you talked about, like, in early recovery not feeling enough, so therefore, I'm a drummer, right? And we talk about the chameleon complex.
Yeah.
We are who we think we need to be around people so that they'll accept us, because what we really want and desire is connection. And it sounds so silly and so simple, but that exercise was so meaningful and powerful to this day that I talk about it all the time, when I tell my story. And so I just kind of wanted to highlight that, because isn't that so cool that even while you're having one of the worst years of your life, that God was able to use you to make a really big impact on other people's life, because you were still doing, still answering the call of what recovery asks of us, and showing up. And I think that's a really cool thing. So
Yeah, man. Well, that's I, I did not know that, and it is amazing to revisit those stories. Because again, even in the literature, it tells us that nothing ensures immunity from this disease and intensive work with others, right? So when you can get out of yourself and your own problem and just pour into other people, like,
mhm.
you can overcome any obstacle, right? No matter how far down the scale you think you are, like, your experience is going to benefit others. And those events rejuvenated me, right? To see others smile and everybody enjoying themselves and going on those mountaintop, meditations that we used to do after the drum circle.
Yep.
And, like, dude, it was so awesome. And I miss those days. But again, it's just like, it's everything that I learned. Like, get out of yourself, give to others, and your life will be, dramatically better. And yeah, thanks for reminding me of that, because, like, again, you can.
Absolutely.
That's the
Yeah.
beauty of recovery. You're gonna look back and realize how much you actually done. Like, I have forgotten more of the good things that have happened in my life because there's so much of it now, right?
Hmm.
When before I couldn't look in the mirror because I felt like I had no accomplishments.
Yeah.
And like now I got so many that I forget about them, right? But I still wake up with the disease thinking that I haven't done enough.
Hmm.
And there's still more work to be done.
So true. Um, well, I'm glad I got to share that with you because, you know, I think a lot of times when we have an impact on somebody's life like that, um, people speaking from personal experience, I wasn't in a place where I was even able to identify what that meant to me or how it changed my life until years later, right? And you and I haven't been in close contact because we've been geographically separated and what have you for some time. So I'm glad that we've gotten this opportunity, this moment to talk about it because it is really cool. Listen, I've got. I know we're almost out of time, so I've got a final question I want to ask you, and I like to ask everybody, to the person who is listening or watching that says, man, that story is me. I identify and can relate so much to what he's saying. Um, what last word of encouragement would you like to leave with them today?
Mm. Yeah, if this is your story and you're just kind of in a tough spot, like, have the courage to to expose your brokenness, right? That every single one of us, no matter how well put together we think we are, like, we're all broken people. And
Yeah.
what what I hear is that we're perfectly, beautifully broken people. And the thing that keeps us all together is our relationship with each other, our relationship with our higher power. And when we can, like I said, the coolest thing that helped me see that was was one of my old pastors had a lamp, and he had a inside the lamp was, a light bulb, right? There was like a vase. He put a light bulb inside the vase, and he turned the lights off in the auditorium, and he turned on the lamp, and you couldn't see it because the vase was perfectly whole,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then what he did is he grabbed the hammer and he popped the vase and punched holes in it, and the light was able to shine through
Mm-hmm.
the brokenness, right? And so when we are trying to always put our best faces forward, like we're all put together, no one can see what they need to see from you, the light, the spirit, God, whatever you want to call it. They can't see that because you're pretending like you're perfect. But when you can show your brokenness like we did today, like, I'm not proud of my past, but I'm no longer embarrassed about it
Yeah.
because I know that's how the healing happens. So today, for any of you guys who are like still broken and are ashamed of it, like, don't be. Like, be proud of that. You are still succeeding today to be breathing, and that there are tons of us around waiting, just waiting to help you, so that you too can one day tell your story and help out the next person. That's all this. That's all this is.
Ooh, I'm so glad you shared that. What a great metaphor, and so true. Uh, wow. Well, I will say one last thing. I always like to close out and say this because I believe it from the bottom of my heart, and want to remind everybody that it is never too late to start loving yourself, and you are only one decision away from a completely different life. So, with
Absolutely.
that, thank you again, Jaime, and thanks for everybody watching and listening. I hope you have a good day.
Have a good day, everybody.
For more information on today's episode, check out the show notes. Recovery Stories is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health's Rooted alumni community. If you or a loved one are struggling, have questions, or ready to take the next step, call our admission center at 888-648-4098. or visit us online at www.promisesbehavioralhealth.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please share with your friends. Follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. We are grateful for you and hope that you have been encouraged by today's episode. As always, remember you are only one decision away from a completely different life, and it is never too late to start loving yourself.